What German soldiers said when they first fought Gurkhas. North Africa, November 1941. The desert night is cold in ways that surprise soldiers who only know the Sahara from its scorching days. A German infantry unit, part of Rommel's Afrika Korps, has dug defensive positions along a ridge south of Tobruk. They've been fighting the British for months now, and they've developed a soldier's practical respect for their enemy. The British fight well. Their tanks are sometimes better than German panzers. Their artillery is accurate. But the British fight by rules. The Germans understand European rules. Continental warfare adapted to desert terrain. Orders follow military logic. Attacks come with preparation. Warfare is professional, almost predictable in its patterns. Tonight, something different is coming. A Gefreiter corporal named Klaus Bergmann huddles in his foxhole, cleaning sand from his rifle's action for the third time today. He's 23 years old, from Hamburg, and he's been in North Africa for 4 months. Long enough to hate the sand that gets into everything. Long enough to respect the British infantry they've been fighting. Not long enough to understand what the older soldiers mean when they whisper about the new British units arriving from the east. His sergeant, a veteran of Poland and France, named Otto Schäfer, slides into the foxhole beside him. Bergmann, "Hast du von den Gurkhas gehört?" Bergmann looks up. Gurkhas? Schäfer lights a cigarette, cupping the flame so it doesn't give away their position. Indian troops, mountain fighters from somewhere in the Himalayas. They're being brought in to reinforce the British lines. Bergmann shrugs. We've fought colonial troops before. The Indians at Hal Fire weren't so tough. Schäfer takes a long drag. And in the embers' glow, Bergmann sees something unusual on the sergeant's face. Fear, not panic. Not the wide-eyed terror of green troops under their first bombardment, but the quiet, knowing fear of a veteran who's heard things he wishes he hadn't. These aren't like other colonial troops, Schäfer says. I talked to some Italian prisoners we captured. They fought Gurkhas in Eritrea 2 years ago, they said. He pauses, choosing words carefully. They said the Gurkhas don't fight like Europeans. They don't take prisoners if they can help it. They carry these knives, curved knives called kukris, and they prefer to kill silently. At night, Bergmann laughs, though it comes out nervous. That's just propaganda. British psychological warfare. Maybe. Schäfer doesn't sound convinced. Or maybe it's true. The Italians said they found their sentries in the morning with their throats cut. No sound, no struggle, just dead. This conversation, or variations of it, is happening across Rommel's lines that November. The Gurkhas are coming, not as an army yet. Not in the massive numbers they'll eventually field, but as specialists. As elite infantry being fed into the North African campaign where British forces need an edge. And the rumors precede them like a psychological bombardment. German intelligence reports describe them in dry military language. Nepalese troops serving in British Indian Army regiments, approximately 5'3" to 5'5" in height, known for aggressive close-quarters combat and high morale, recruitment based on warrior caste traditions. But the rumors German soldiers tell each other are far more visceral. They don't take prisoners. They cut throats in the dark. They carry those knives, and they know how to use them. They smile before they kill you. Most soldiers dismiss these as exaggerations. Colonial troops, Indian, African, whatever, had fought for the British in the First World War, and German veterans remembered them as competent but not exceptional. This is just the British trying to scare us, a lieutenant tells his platoon during a briefing. Psychological operations. Don't let it affect your fighting. But the older Unteroffizier non-commissioned officers aren't so sure, because they've learned in Poland, in France, in Yugoslavia, that when soldiers from multiple armies all tell the same stories about an enemy, there's usually truth underneath the exaggeration. The Gurkhas arrive in North Africa in November 1941 as part of the British effort to break the siege of Tobruk. The 4th Indian Division, which includes Gurkha battalions, is battle-hardened from campaigns in East Africa, where they've already earned a reputation fighting Italian and German colonial forces. The first contact happens during a British offensive near Sidi Rezek. A German reconnaissance unit, 8 men in 2 vehicles, is probing British lines looking for weak points. Standard procedure. They've done this dozens of times. They approach what they think is an undermanned British position, a few scattered trenches, maybe a platoon's worth of defenders. They're planning to test the defenses, draw some fire, mark the position for artillery, and withdraw. What they don't know is that the position is held by a company of Gurkhas who've been waiting in absolute silence for exactly this kind of probe. The German vehicles roll within 200 meters. The Gurkhas don't fire. 150 meters. Still nothing. The German commander is getting nervous. Why aren't they shooting? Are they even there? 100 meters. The Gurkhas open fire with stunning coordination, rifles, machine guns, mortars, all at once. A devastating ambush executed with parade ground precision. Both German vehicles are disabled in seconds. The survivors bail out, taking cover behind the wrecks, returning fire. This is still normal combat. Violent, terrifying, but within the parameters of what they understand. Then the Gurkhas charge. Not a disorganized rush, not a suicidal human wave, but a disciplined, rapid advance with covering fire and practiced coordination, and they're screaming. The Ayo Gorkhali war cry. The Gurkhas are coming. Cuts through the gunfire like a blade through fabric. The sound freezes something in the German survivors. One will later write, "We'd faced Polish cavalry charges, French infantry assaults, Russian human waves. But this was different. They were small men. Most barely came to my shoulder, but they moved like they'd been born to kill. And that sound they made, that wasn't fear or rage. It was joy. The engagement lasts 4 minutes. 3 Germans die. 5 are wounded and captured. The Gurkhas suffer 2 casualties, 1 wounded, 1 killed. The surviving Germans are treated correctly as prisoners of war. No torture, no execution. Food and water provided. But the captured Obergefreiter who commanded the patrol will tell interrogators something that makes its way into British intelligence reports. They fought like men who didn't believe they could lose. Like death was something that happened to other people. I've been in combat since Poland. I've never seen anything like them. This report circulates among German units. It's not propaganda anymore. It's a first-hand account from their own men. And it changes how German soldiers think about the enemy they're facing. By December 1941, Gurkha battalions are fully integrated into the North African fighting, and German soldiers are learning harsh lessons about what makes these troops different. It's not just their combat skills, though those are formidable. It's their mindset. European armies in World War II fight according to certain unwritten rules. You don't attack at night if you can help it. Too much confusion, too much friendly fire risk. You don't get close if you don't have to. Modern warfare is about firepower at range. You take prisoners when practical, both sides do it, and both sides benefit from the intelligence. The Gurkhas know these rules. They ignore them when tactically advantageous. They attack at night regularly, moving with silence that seems impossible to German soldiers used to European levels of noise discipline. They close to knife range when other troops would stay back and shoot, and they take prisoners when ordered. But their reputation suggests they prefer not to. A German medic treating wounded from an engagement near Gazala writes in his diary, "Heute 3 Verwundete behandelt, die gegen die Gurkhas gekämpft haben. Alle 3 hatten Messerwunden, keine Schusswunden. Diese in der Kämpfen wie aus einer anderen Seite." Treated 3 wounded today who fought the Gurkhas. All 3 had knife wounds, no gunshot wounds. These Indians fight like they're from another era. The Kukri, the curved Nepalese knife that every Gurkha carries, becomes a source of particular dread. It's not a bayonet. It's not a fighting knife in the Western sense. It's a blade designed for a single purpose, killing efficiently at close range. The weight is in the blade's belly, making it a chopping weapon as much as a cutting one. In the hands of men trained from childhood in its use, it's devastatingly effective. German soldiers who've survived close combat with Gurkhas describe wounds unlike anything. Western armies inflict deep, precise, usually fatal, But the physical weapon is less terrifying than what it represents. An enemy who wants to get close enough to use it. Modern warfare is about distance. Artillery pounds from miles away. Machine guns fire from hundreds of meters. Even rifles engage at ranges where you can barely see faces. The Kukri requires you to be within arm's reach of your enemy. And the Gurkhas actively seek that range. January 1942. The fighting in North Africa has settled into a grinding stalemate around the Gazala line, a series of fortified positions and minefields stretching from the coast into the desert. German and British forces face each other across no man's land, conducting raids, gathering intelligence, testing defenses, at night. The desert belongs to whoever is brave enough, or crazy enough, to venture into the darkness. For German soldiers, night operations in North Africa have become exercises in nerve-shredding tension since the Gurkhas arrived. Hauptmann Friedrich Weber commands a German infantry company holding a section of the Gazala line. He's 31, a career officer who fought in Poland and France, and he considers himself a competent professional who doesn't panic easily. Tonight, he's briefing his platoon leaders on defensive procedures, and he's trying very hard not to sound as worried as he feels. Die britischen Inder führen jede Nacht Überfälle durch, he tells them. The British Indians he's learned not to use tribal names he can't pronounce, conduct raids every night. They target sentries, supply dumps, communication trenches. They come silently. Often we don't know they've been here until we find bodies in the morning. One of his young lieutenants, fresh from Germany, in North Africa for only 2 weeks, asks the question Weber has been dreading. Wie können wir uns dagegen verteidigen? How do we defend against it? Weber doesn't have a good answer. Double the sentries. The Gurkhas seem to kill them in pairs. More flares and searchlights. They somehow move through the light without being seen. Or they wait for darkness between flares. More patrols? That just gives them more targets. The truth, which Weber doesn't say aloud, is that the German army has no doctrine for fighting an enemy like this. They're trained for European warfare, set-piece battles, coordinated attacks, combined arms operations. Not this. Not warriors who treat modern combat like personal knife fights. That night, Weber's fears are validated. At 0230 hours, a sentry named Johann Richter is making his rounds along the company's perimeter. He's following every precaution they've developed, moving unpredictably, stopping frequently to listen, avoiding silhouetting himself against the sky. He never hears the Gurkhas coming. 3 of them have crawled within 10 meters of the German lines, moving with patience that would seem impossible to soldiers trained in European methods. They've watched Richter's pattern for 20 minutes, timing his movements. When he stops to scan the darkness, they move. When he moves, they freeze. They're within knife range before Richter realizes something is wrong, some primal instinct triggering alarm. He turns, starts to raise his rifle. The lead Gurkha covers the distance in 3 strides. The Kukri comes out in a movement so practiced it's almost casual. Richter tries to scream, but the blade is already cutting, and the sound dies as a wet gurgle. His body drops. The Gurkhas are already moving to their secondary target, a machine gun position 15 meters away. The 2-man crew never hears them coming either. The entire raid, infiltration, 3 kills. Exfiltration takes less than 90 seconds. The Gurkhas disappear into darkness. At 0530, when the sun rises and Weber conducts his morning inspection, he finds 3 of his men dead. Clean kills. Professional. Terrifyingly efficient. And on one body, this detail will haunt him for years. The dead soldier's rifle is still slung on his shoulder, unfired. He died so quickly he never got a shot off. Weber writes in his personal diary that night, Wir kämpfen gegen Geister. Sie kommen in der Dunkelheit, töten unsere Männer und verschwinden. Meine Soldaten haben Angst einzuschlafen. Ich auch. We're fighting ghosts. They come in darkness, kill our men, disappear. My soldiers are afraid to sleep. So am I. This experience is not unique to Weber's company. Across the Gazala line, Across every sector where Gurkha battalions are deployed, German units are learning the same harsh lesson. The night belongs to the Gurkhas. And German soldiers who'd considered themselves elite troops after victories in Poland and France are discovering that elite means something different in the Himalayas. Historian Byron Farwell, in his definitive work on Gurkha military history, documents how German commanders in North Africa began requesting transfers away from sectors facing Gurkha units. Not officially, not in written orders that would survive in archives, but through unofficial channels, through quiet conversations with staff officers, through the unspoken understanding that certain positions were more dangerous than others. Facing Gurkhas meant accepting higher casualties among your sentries, more psychological stress on your troops, more sleepless nights wondering if those sounds in the darkness were wind or death approaching silently. The psychological impact cannot be overstated. Combat psychology research by military psychiatrist Dave Grossman identifies unpredictability and inability to retaliate as two of the most stress-inducing factors in warfare. German soldiers facing Gurkha night raids experienced both. The raids came unpredictably, sometimes nightly, sometimes with days between attacks. No pattern to predict, and retaliation was impossible. By the time Germans realized they were under attack, the Gurkhas were gone. You couldn't shoot back at an enemy you couldn't see. You couldn't call artillery on positions that were empty by the time shells arrived. You could only wait, maintain vigilance, and hope you weren't the next target. This kind of stress breaks soldiers faster than pitched battles. In conventional combat, there's action shooting back, taking cover, coordinating with your unit. Against Gurkha raids, there's only passive defense and waiting, and humans are psychologically poorly equipped for that. By March 1942, German military intelligence has compiled extensive reports on Gurkha tactics and capabilities. These reports circulate through the Afrika Korps, and they make sobering reading. One report notes, Gurkha soldiers display combat effectiveness disproportionate to their small physical stature. They demonstrate exceptional night vision, extraordinary physical endurance, and complete disregard for personal safety when attacking. Morale appears unbreakable. Another report, more candid in tone. Our soldiers fear them. This fear is not cowardice, but recognition of superior skill in close combat. Recommend avoiding close quarters engagement when possible. This is remarkable admission from an army that considered itself the finest in Europe. The Germans aren't saying the Gurkhas are better soldiers overall. That would contradict their entire ideological framework. But they're acknowledging that in certain types of combat, night fighting, close quarters, raids, the Gurkhas are simply superior, and German tactics begin to adapt. Orders go out across the Afrika Korps units facing Gurkha sectors. Double all sentries. Never patrol alone. Maintain maximum distance from enemy lines. Increase use of flares and illumination. Avoid close combat at all costs. These are defensive measures from an army that had spent 2 years on the offensive. The psychological shift is profound. A German Feldwebel sergeant named Hans Kruger writes to his brother in April 1942. Sie sind klein, diese Gurkhas, aber sie kämpfen wie Dämonen. Wir haben Frankreich in 6 Wochen besiegt, aber hier in der Wüste fürchten wir uns vor diesen kleinen Männern aus den Bergen. Das ist unsere neue Realität. They're small, these Gurkhas, but they fight like demons. We defeated France in 6 weeks, but here in the desert we fear these little men from the mountains. This is our new reality. Monte, Cassino, Italy, February 1944. The war has moved from the deserts of North Africa to the mountains of Italy, and German soldiers are discovering that Gurkhas are even more dangerous in terrain that resembles their Himalayan homeland. The monastery at Monte Cassino sits atop a mountain dominating the Liri Valley, the route to Rome. German paratroopers of the 1st Fallschirmjäger Division have turned the surrounding peaks into a fortress. They're elite troops themselves, survivors of Crete, veterans of the Eastern Front, and they've been told they're holding against British and American forces trying to break through to Rome. What they haven't been fully briefed on is that several Gurkha battalions are part of the attacking force. Obergefreiter Martin Steiner crouches in a stone bunker on point 593, a strategic height overlooking the monastery. He's 28, from Bavaria, and he's been fighting since 1940. He considers himself hard to impress after 3 years of war. But when his company commander briefs them that Gurkhas are in the assault force, Steiner feels his stomach tighten. He'd served in North Africa before the Afrika Korps collapsed. He'd been there for the night raids. He'd found comrades with their throats cut. He'd hoped he'd never face them again. The battle for Monte Cassino begins with the massive Allied bombardment that reduces the ancient monastery to rubble, a controversial decision that military historians still debate. But the Germans aren't in the monastery. They're in the surrounding hills, in positions carved into rock that aerial bombardment barely touches. And when the bombardment lifts and Allied forces attack, the Germans are ready. The first assaults by American and British units are repulsed with heavy casualties. The terrain favors defense, steep slopes, limited approaches, interlocking fields of fire. German paratroopers fight with skill and determination, and for days the battle is a bloody stalemate. Then the Gurkhas enter the fight. The 1st 9th Gurkha Rifles is assigned to capture point 593, the position Steiner is defending. The attack comes at night, naturally. But unlike previous Allied assaults that announce themselves with artillery preparation and organized waves, the Gurkhas infiltrate silently through terrain that German commanders considered impassable. They climb rock faces that require technical climbing skills. They move through darkness on narrow paths, where a single misstep means a fatal fall. They approach German positions from angles the defenders didn't think needed watching. Steiner's first warning is a sudden burst of gunfire from a position 50 meters to his left, a machine gun nest that's suddenly under attack. Then screaming. Not German screaming. The attackers. That sound he remembers from North Africa. Ayo Gorkali. The Gurkhas are here. The next 20 minutes are the most terrifying of Steiner's war. The attack comes from multiple directions simultaneously. Somehow the Gurkhas have infiltrated around the German positions, cutting them off from reinforcement, attacking from flanks and rear. In the confined space of mountain combat, this turns into the kind of close-quarters fighting that Gurkhas specialize in. Steiner fires his rifle at shadows, at movement, at anything that doesn't look German. A Gurkha rifleman appears from behind a boulder 15 meters away. They see each other simultaneously. Steiner's rifle is already pointed in that direction. He fires first. The Gurkha drops, but 2 more appear immediately behind him, and they're already firing. Steiner dives into his bunker as bullets spark off stone around him. He lands badly, twisting his ankle. And before he can recover, a Gurkha soldier is in the bunker entrance, backlit by starlight. For a frozen moment, they stare at each other. The Gurkha is impossibly small, barely 5 feet tall, Steiner will later estimate, but he's carrying a rifle, bandoliers of ammunition, grenades, and that curved knife at his belt. And his expression is utterly calm. Not rage, not fear, just professional focus. Steiner's rifle is across the bunker, 3 meters away. The Gurkha's rifle is already coming up. Steiner knows he's about to die. Then German artillery called in by another position begins landing on point 593. Shells explode across the peak, forcing both Germans and Gurkhas to take cover. The Gurkha in Steiner's bunker entrance disappears into the smoke and chaos. The bombardment continues for 10 minutes, friendly fire that kills Germans as well as Gurkhas, but breaks up the assault. When it lifts, the Gurkhas have withdrawn, taking their wounded with them. Steiner's position has held, but barely. Of his squad of 10 men, 4 are dead, 3 wounded, and every single casualty bears knife wounds, as well as, or instead of, gunshot wounds. The Gurkhas got close enough to use kukris. Steiner will later tell a reporter, "At Monte Cassino, I learned the difference between brave soldiers and born warriors. We were brave, we'd proven that across Europe, but the Gurkhas were something else. They didn't fight because they had to. They fought because they were good at it. Fighting was what they were. This distinction matters. German paratroopers at Monte Cassino were elite troops, volunteers, highly trained, ideologically committed. But they were soldiers doing a job, even if they did it exceptionally well. The Gurkhas approached combat differently. Military historian Chris Bellamy notes that Gurkha regiments recruited from Nepalese hill tribes, where martial tradition stretched back centuries, where warrior status was cultural identity, not just occupation. They didn't fight because Hitler or Churchill ordered it. They fought because the Kshatriya warrior tradition, the caste identity of fighters, was embedded in their cultural DNA. This isn't romanticism, it's anthropology. Societies that select and train warriors from childhood produce different combat psychology than societies that draft civilians and train them as soldiers. The result at Monte Cassino was German troops themselves, elite facing opponents who approached warfare as craft mastery rather than duty. And the Germans, to their credit, recognized this. After Monte Cassino, German military intelligence updates its assessments of Gurkha capabilities with something approaching admiration. One report states, "Gurkha troops represent perhaps the finest light infantry in the world. In close combat and mountain warfare, they have no equal among enemy forces. It is recommended that when facing Gurkha units, engagements be conducted at maximum range with heavy fire support." This is not propaganda. This is tactical advice from one professional military to another. We can't beat them at their preferred range and terrain, so don't fight them there. By spring 1944, as the Italian campaign grinds northward through mountains and fortified lines, German veterans have developed a complex relationship with the Gurkhas. They fear them, that's undeniable, but they also respect them in ways they don't respect other Allied troops. A lieutenant named Wolfgang Becker, recovering from wounds sustained fighting Gurkhas at the Gothic Line, writes in his diary, "Wir hassen die Amerikaner, weil sie uns mit Material überwältigen. Wir verachten die Italiener, weil sie uns verraten haben. Aber die Gurkhas, sie respektieren wir. Sie kämpfen wie wir kämpfen sollten mit Mut, Geschick und ohne Beschwerde. Wenn der Krieg vorbei ist, würde ich gerne mit einem Gurkha ein Bier trinken und über den Kampf sprechen. Wir würden uns wehrstehen. We hate the Americans because they overwhelm us with material. We despise the Italians because they betrayed us. But the Gurkhas, we respect them. They fight how we should fight, with courage, skill, and without complaint. When the war is over, I'd like to share a beer with a Gurkha and talk about the fighting. We would understand each other." This sentiment appears repeatedly in German sources, the warrior-to-warrior respect that transcends the politics of the war. It's the same respect that Allied troops sometimes expressed for German paratroopers or SS mountain troops. Acknowledgement that on the opposite side are professionals who do their job exceptionally well. But there's something more in German accounts of fighting Gurkhas. There's a kind of relief that they're facing an enemy they can respect rather than just fear. Relief that warfare against the Gurkhas, while terrifying, follows certain rules, the ancient rules of warrior combat, rather than the industrial slaughter of the Eastern Front. A German medical officer treating wounded from the Gothic Line notes, "Gurkha-inflicted wounds are severe, but somehow cleaner than wounds from other combat. They fight to kill, but they don't torture. They're professional. In this terrible war, that's something." This observation reveals a psychological truth about combat. Soldiers can endure fighting against enemies they respect more easily than fighting against enemies they fear without understanding. The Gurkhas were understandable. They were warriors. They fought hard. They killed efficiently. But they did so within a framework that soldiers recognized. Not the ideological fanaticism of some SS units, not the industrial horror of the Eastern Front, just professional warriors doing what warriors do. And that, paradoxically, made them psychologically easier to face despite being tactically more dangerous. Northern Italy, October 1944. The Gothic Line, Germany's last major defensive position in Italy, stretches across the Apennine Mountains. German forces have had months to prepare positions, and they've learned hard lessons about fighting Gurkhas. Hauptmann Ernst Weber commands a mountain infantry company holding a sector near Monte Battaglia. He's 33, has fought in Norway, Russia, and now Italy, and he's developed a reputation as a thinking officer who adapts tactics to enemy capabilities. He's studied every available intelligence report on Gurkha tactics. He's interviewed survivors from Monte Cassino. He's analyzed the patterns of their attacks, looking for weaknesses to exploit. And he's come to a conclusion that he presents to his battalion commander. We can't beat them at close range, so we have to never let them get close. The tactics Weber implements reflect hard-won German tactical evolution. Maximum standoff distance. Engage Gurkha units at 400+ meters with machine guns and mortars. Never allow them within 200 meters if avoidable. No static sentries. Instead of fixed positions that can be infiltrated, use mobile patrols with radio contact and mutually supporting positions. Illumination, saturation, constant flares at night. If you can't see them, you can't fight them. Layered defense. Multiple fallback positions, so that if Gurkhas penetrate the first line, they face prepared defenses in depth. Artillery pre-planned. Defensive fire missions already calculated for likely Gurkha approach routes, ready to be called instantly. These aren't revolutionary tactics. They're standard defensive doctrine, but applying them specifically against Gurkhas requires discipline and resources that German forces in late 1944 increasingly lack. Ammunition is limited. Illumination rounds are precious. Radio batteries are scarce. The Gothic line fighting becomes a study in asymmetric warfare. The Gurkhas have the tactical advantage in close combat and terrain they're trained for. The Germans have the defensive advantage of prepared positions and, when supply permits, superior firepower. The result is attritional warfare where both sides take heavy casualties. A Gurkha attack on Weber's sector in October 1944 demonstrates both the effectiveness of German adaptations and their ultimate futility. The attack comes at night, as expected, but German flares catch the Gurkhas during their approach, illuminating them at 300 meters outside Kukri range, within machine gun range. German machine guns open fire with interlocking fields that catch the advancing Gurkhas in crossfire. The attack falters. Gurkha casualties are heavy. Weber's defense has worked, but the Gurkhas don't retreat permanently. They pull back, regroup, and attack again the next night from a different direction, and the next night from another angle, and the night after that. By the fourth night, German ammunition is running low. Flare inventory is depleted. Machine gun barrels are overheated and replacement barrels haven't arrived. And Weber's men are exhausted from 4 consecutive nights of combat. On the 5th night, when the Gurkhas attack again, German defensive fire is noticeably weaker. Fewer machine guns responding. Fewer flares lighting the approach. The Gurkhas close to within 100 meters before German fire stops them. On the 7th night, they reach German positions. Weber's company holds, but barely, and at terrible cost. When dawn comes on the 8th day, Weber requests permission to withdraw to secondary positions. His company has lost 40% of its strength. His men are physically and mentally exhausted, and the Gurkhas are still there, still attacking, seemingly inexhaustible. This pattern repeats across the Gothic line wherever Gurkha units are engaged. German tactical adaptations work up to a point, but they require resources and sustainability that Germany no longer possesses. The Wehrmacht of 1944 isn't the Wehrmacht of 1940. Ammunition shortages constrain defensive fire. Manpower shortages mean casualties can't be replaced adequately. Morale issues affect performance. Soldiers know Germany is losing, that the war is approaching its end. Against an opponent like the Gurkhas, who don't seem affected by Germany's systemic collapse, this becomes psychologically devastating. A German soldier named Paul Richter writes to his wife in November 1944, Wir wissen, dass wir diesen Krieg verlieren, aber die Gurkhas wissen es anscheinend nicht. Sie kämpfen weiter, als ob der Krieg gerade erst begonnen hätte. Ihr Mut macht unsere Verzweiflung noch schlimmer. We know we're losing this war. But the Gurkhas apparently don't know it. They keep fighting as if the war just started. Their courage makes our despair worse. This psychological dimension is crucial. By late 1944, many German soldiers are fighting defensively, hoping to survive until the inevitable end. The Gurkhas, by contrast, are fighting offensively, pressing attacks with the same intensity they showed in 1941. The psychological impact on German troops of facing an enemy who maintains high morale while your own morale crumbles cannot be overstated. Combat psychiatrists, studies from multiple wars confirm that unit morale is contagious both positively and negatively. Seeing your enemy's unwavering combat effectiveness while your own side deteriorates creates a psychological spiral. Why are we even fighting anymore? Becomes the unspoken question. And when you're facing Gurkhas who clearly haven't asked themselves that question, who attack night after night with undiminished ferocity, the answer becomes harder to find. By December 1944, as winter settles over the Italian mountains, the Gothic line fighting has become a microcosm of Germany's larger strategic situation. German tactical skill remains high. These are experienced soldiers fighting on prepared defensive terrain. But tactical skill can't overcome strategic exhaustion. Germany is running out of everything. Men, ammunition, fuel, hope, and the Gurkhas, along with the rest of the Allied forces in Italy, just keep coming. A German battalion commander writes in his official report, Die Gurkha-Truppen zeigen keine Anzeichen von Kampfmüdigkeit oder verminderter Moral. Ihre taktische Kompetenz bleibt hoch. Unsere Verteidigungsstellungen können ihre Angriffe versögen, aber nicht dauerhaft stoppen. Mit unseren aktuellen Ressourcen ist ein langfristiger Erfolg gegen diese Truppen unmöglich. Gurkha troops show no signs of combat fatigue or reduced morale. Their tactical competence remains high. Our defensive positions can delay their attacks but cannot permanently stop them. With our current resources, long-term success against these troops is impossible. This isn't defeatism, it's professional military assessment from an officer who understands when a tactical situation is untenable. By spring 1945, the Gothic line is collapsing, not primarily because of Gurkha attacks, though those played a significant role, but because German forces across Italy are disintegrating as the Third Reich enters its final weeks. The Gurkhas are part of the Allied spring offensive that breaks through German lines in April 1945. German soldiers who encounter them in these final battles describe troops who are still attacking with the same ferocity they showed in 1941, still using kukris when they get close, still conducting night raids, still seemingly immune to the exhaustion and despair affecting everyone else. A German Feldwebel captured by Gurkhas in late April 1945 will later recount, "They treated us correctly as prisoners, gave us water, didn't abuse us. But what struck me was how professional they remained. We were defeated, exhausted, just glad the war was ending. They were still soldiers, still sharp, still ready to fight. I envied that, in a way." Minden, West Germany, 1947. A former German Oberst colonel named Friedrich von Mellenthin sits in his study, writing his memoirs of the war. Von Mellenthin served on Rommel's staff in North Africa, later commanded units in Italy. He's trying to write honestly about the war, the victories, the defeats, the mistakes. When he reaches the section about fighting Gurkha troops, he pauses for a long time before writing, "Von allen Gegnern, gegen die wir kämpften, waren die Gurkhas die beeindruckendsten. Nicht die gefährlichsten, das waren die Sowjets mit ihrer schieren Maße. Nicht die am besten ausgerüsteten, das waren die Amerikaner. Aber die Gurkhas waren die wohlständigsten Soldaten. Technik, Mut, Disziplin und etwas Unbeschreibares vielleicht die Seele des Kriegers. Of all opponents we fought, the Gurkhas were the most impressive. Not the most dangerous, that was the Soviets with their sheer mass. Not the best equipped, that was the Americans. But the Gurkhas were the most complete soldiers. Skill, courage, discipline, and something indescribable, perhaps the soul of the warrior. Von Mellenthin's assessment reflects a consensus among German veterans who fought Gurkhas. In the post-war years, as former enemies begin sharing perspectives, a remarkable pattern emerges in German accounts. They don't speak of Gurkhas with the hatred reserved for Soviet troops. They don't speak with the dismissive contempt sometimes expressed about Italian forces. They speak with respect bordering on admiration. At reunions of Afrika Korps veterans in the 1,950 and 60 seconds, conversations about the war inevitably turn to the Gurkhas. Stories are shared always with a mixture of fear remembered and respect earned. The night raids, the kukris, the impossible silence of their approach, but also their professionalism, their courage, the fact that they fought hard but treated prisoners correctly. One veteran organization publishes a newsletter in 1965 with an article titled Unsere würdigsten Gegner, Our Most Worthy Opponents. It profiles several enemy forces German troops respected. The Gurkhas feature prominently. The article notes, "We feared them, but we also understood them. They were warriors, as we tried to be. In a war full of ideology and hatred, fighting the Gurkhas was somehow cleaner. It was soldier against soldier, skill against skill." This sentiment reveals something profound about military culture. Warriors across cultures recognize each other, not as friends they were trying to kill each other, after all, but as practitioners of the same craft. The Gurkha Io Gorkhali war cry and the German Vorwärts, advance order, come from different languages and traditions, but they express the same warrior spirit. In 1976, a reunion takes place in London that makes minor news. Former German Afrika Korps officers meet with Gurkha veterans who fought against them in North Africa. The British press covers it as a heartwarming story of reconciliation. But the conversations between the veterans reveal something deeper. A German former Hauptmann tells a Gurkha Subedar Major Warrant Officer equivalent, "We were terrified of you. Your night raids cost us more sleep than anything else in the desert." The Gurkha smiles. "We knew. That was half the tactic. Fear is a weapon." They talk tactics for hours, how the Gurkhas planned their raids, how the Germans tried to defend, the endless tactical chess game. At one point, the German asks about the Kukri. "Why prefer knives when you had rifles?" The Gurkha's answer is revealing. Rifles make noise. Knives are silent. But more than that, when you kill a man with a rifle, you're shooting at a target. When you kill with a Kukri, you're looking in his eyes. It's more honest, more respectful, in a way. The German considers this. "I never thought of it that way. But I understand. This is warrior culture, transcending national boundaries." The Gurkha tradition of the Kukri isn't just about tactical advantage, though that's real. It's about maintaining connection to warrior heritage, to the idea that fighting is personal, that killing requires acknowledgement of the humanity you're ending. German soldiers, raised in a different military tradition, initially saw the Kukri as simply terrifying. But veterans, reflecting decades later, sometimes recognize a philosophical dimension they couldn't appreciate in combat. By the 1,980 seconds and 90 seconds, as World War II veterans age and begin recording final oral histories, German accounts of fighting Gurkhas have achieved almost mythological status. Not mythology in the sense of falsehood, but mythology in the sense of stories that convey deeper truths. The small men from the mountains who fought like gods, the warriors who made no sound until they struck, the soldiers who never seemed to break, never seemed to fear, never seemed to doubt. Military historian John Keegan, interviewing German veterans for his research, notes that Gurkhas appear in German accounts with a frequency disproportionate to the actual percentage of combat they represented. The Gurkhas weren't everywhere. They were elite units, employed selectively. But they made such an impression that German soldiers remember them vividly decades later. Keegan writes, The German military, which prided itself on producing superior soldiers through training and ideology, encountered in the Gurkhas an opponent whose superiority came from culture and tradition. This seems to have shaken German military self-perception in ways that facing numerically superior enemies did not. This is the Gurkha legacy in German military memory. Not just that they were tough opponents, many armies fielded tough opponents, but that they represented something German military culture thought it had perfected: the warrior elite. And the Gurkhas did it differently, did it from different cultural foundations, and arguably did it better in certain contexts. A German veteran named Klaus Hartmann, interviewed in 1995 at age 78, summarizes it simply: Wir dachten, wir wären die besten Soldaten der Welt. Dann trafen wir die Gurkhas. Sie lehrten uns Demut. We thought we were the best soldiers in the world. Then we met the Gurkhas. They taught us humility. This humility, this recognition that German military excellence wasn't unique, that other warrior traditions could match or exceed it, is perhaps the most lasting impact of German soldiers' encounters with Gurkhas. In 2025, 80 years after World War II ended, a few surviving veterans remain. A documentary filmmaker asks a 101-year-old former German soldier about his most vivid war memory. He thinks for a long time. Then, night patrol in North Africa. We heard nothing, saw nothing. Then our point man just collapsed. No shot, no sound. The Gurkhas had found us first. We ran. I'm not ashamed to say it. We ran. Do you have any message for Gurkha veterans? The old man's eyes are distant, seeing something 80 years past. Tell them we remember. Tell them they were the best we ever faced. Tell them there was honor in our fighting, even when everything else about the war was without honor. He pauses. Und sagen Sie ihnen, Ayo Gurkhali, wir haben diesen Schlachtruf nie vergessen. And tell them, Ayo Gurkhali, we never forgot that war cry. This is what German soldiers said when they fought Gurkhas. First, they said, they're just colonial troops. Then, they fight like demons. Then, we fear them. Then, we respect them. And finally, decades later, they were warriors. And we were privileged to face warriors, even when they defeated us. The Gurkha reputation earned in blood across North African deserts and Italian mountains remains one of the most remarkable warrior legacies of World War II. Not because they were invincible. They weren't. Gurkha units took casualties like any troops. Not because they never lost. They did battles went both ways. But because they imprinted themselves on enemy consciousness in ways few military units ever achieve. They were small men who fought like giants. They carried knives into the age of machine guns and made the knives relevant. They maintained warrior tradition in industrial warfare. And German soldiers, fighting for a losing cause they increasingly doubted, found themselves facing opponents who never doubted, never hesitated, never broke. That was what the Gurkhas gave German soldiers. A reminder of what warfare looked like when stripped of ideology and politics and industrialized slaughter. Just warriors, fighting warriors, with skill and courage and that indefinable quality German veterans called the soul of the warrior. Ayo Gurkhali, the Gurkhas are coming. German soldiers heard that cry across 2 continents. And 80 years later, they haven't forgotten.